The Other Side of Fear, a backpacker's memoir by Jenni Reavis. Unhidden Heroines series, book number 1. Chapter 17, Jardin. The farther we ventured into our 4-hour bus ride, the farther along we got on the twisty, turny, 2-lane highway that took me into what I deemed paradise. The coffee plants and banana trees that encompassed this path were so close that I could nearly reach out from my bus window to grab them. The weather was a perfect 70 degrees, and the windows were open with a fresh breeze blowing through my hair. The sky's blue was divinely complemented by the lush green of the rolling mountainous landscapes, which I got an impeccable view of when our bus would round a sharp corner. Through breaks in the foliage, I saw the steep roadside drop-off where rocks from the road bounced off and tumbled to their death in the gorge below. About halfway to Jardin, among the surrounding Andes mountains stood one peak more prominent than them all. It had a perfect triangle top. That is Cerro Tusa, Hernan informed me. It has a legend and a hidden magic. Something told me that later on this journey, I would find that mountain and try to scale it. The moment we arrived in Jardin, I was in love. I couldn't believe I'd be spending extended time in a place so magical. Everything about it seemed uncannily familiar to me, as if I'd been there my whole life and in other past lifetimes. Hernan took one of my bags, and we hiked up a long hill to his friend's house where I would stay for a few days while further arrangements were made. She was out of town, and I would have the house to myself until Hernan and I found myself an apartment to get settled into. The first thing we did was go eat. He took me to a place called Margarita's, where I had my first ever bowl of plantain soup and my first conversation with a young man named Sebas, who would become my best friend there. Sebas and I connected immediately and exchanged contact info. Sebas wasn't even supposed to be working that day, and he wasn't assigned to our table. He had simply stopped to clear dirty dishes from our table and chose to strike up a conversation with me. It was a divine appointment that we ate there on the day that Sebas randomly got called in to help with extra chores and that we crossed paths. I had no idea that he would play a huge role in saving my life further into my adventure. Hernan found an apartment for me to rent on the outskirts of town in Jardin. It was a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom place with a portable gas burner where I could cook basic things. There was a lavadero next to the sink where my clothes could be washed by hand, and on the opposite side of that room was an open patio with no cover over it, where I weaved a thin rope back and forth twice up high so I could hang my clothes to dry. One of the women directors of the school where I would volunteer insisted that she pay for a maid to come twice a week to wash my clothes and clean my apartment. And she generously offered many things from her house to help me furnish my apartment. I was all set up to be comfortable there until December-ish, although I had no idea what my exact plans would be, which was the enthralling nature of a one-way ticket. It was a 45-minute walk into the mountains to get to the rural school where I would volunteer, and a 45-minute walk back to my apartment in town. Sorry. Sebas and I met in the park 2 or 3 times per week to study basic English and just share about life in general. Gosh, we had so much to learn from each other. Coming from 2 completely different countries and cultures, we agreed that we wanted to plan a trip to the coast together before my busy semester and internship started. He came over to my apartment to make us delicious homemade breakfast once a week. He took me on hikes to nearby must-sees like the big Jesus statue called Cristo Rey and a famous waterfall that most tourists pay to ride on horses to get to. We always walked. Hernan took me to the rural sector of the schoolhouse where I would do my internship. He introduced me to a group of my high school students who would come by my apartment often to take me on long walks and hikes to show me new things around Jardin. They took me on La Garrucha, cable cars that lifted us up to a rural sector embedded in the side of the mountain where there was a place to eat fresh empanadas at a table overlooking the village. They took me on a long walk to a trout farm and on hidden paths that only farmers used to get from their farms to town to sell their products, which could include coffee, fruit, vegetables from their farms, or handmade baskets and furniture. The student I connected with the most significantly and very quickly was Juancho, who was 16. I would spend a lot of time with him and his family. One day, Joanne messaged me that she was coming to Colombia to visit her family in Bogota and also take part in a tour through Huila, a different department in Colombia. with a group of university professors who rented a private bus. She said my spot on the tour bus would be paid for and that she would cover my hotel room. I would only pay for my flight there and my expense for food and drinks. Of course, I could not miss out on seeing new parts of Colombia, so I said yes. Sebas and I would schedule our trip to the coast for the week after that trip, and I would just stay in Medellin until he could meet me there. I packed a bag of only my essentials and began my adventure for the first time by myself, navigating transport in Colombia. I intentionally arrived in Neiva, Huila, a couple of days before Joanne planned to be so that I could have my own adventure. My journey began with a bus ride back to Medellin, where I would take a taxi toward downtown, catch the bus that went the 45-minute route to the airport, and navigate domestic flights for the first time all by myself. I couldn't believe that a flight from Medellin to Neiva, the capital of Huila, was only $30. Being in a country so much cheaper than the United States opened up a whole new quality of life for me. As soon as I got to Neiva, I found a room that would give me shelter for a couple of nights. Then I hit the streets. Huila was a drastic, hot, and dry change from the eternal spring of Medellin. The first thing I always do in a new place is drop my things on my bed wherever I'm staying and go find a place where I can sit down and try a regional dish. I walked a few blocks from my hotel and I found a pathway that led to a little hidden park. Had I not walked down the path, I wouldn't have even seen this park. It isn't visible from the main road. There were people selling arts and crafts, and in the back sat a woman at her food cart with no customers. She was the one. I sat with her for an hour, eating homemade soup and fresh lulu juice that she made with her own precious hands as we began to chat. She told me that the next day, her 15-year-old daughter would be free all day to hang out if I was interested in having a tour guide. Yeah. Her daughter came by for me at my hotel the next morning, and we began an outstanding day of exploring. She took me to a park next to the Magdalena River, where there was a large monument with winding stairs built up the center. We climbed to the top for a view of the river. Once we got up there, I saw that a long ways down the river, there was a speedboat taking people across the river to a place where I could see people lived. What are they doing? I asked her. The boat works as a taxi, taking people across to where they live on the other side. Those people across the river live in their own community, she explained. I had never taken a boat taxi before. I had taken a ferry to get from Cozumel to the mainland years ago, but never an actual speedboat taxi. Can we go over there if I pay for our taxi fares? I asked her. She eagerly nodded her head, equally excited about random adventure as I was. We climbed back down to wander down the riverbank until we found a guy with a boat taxi. It was just $1 a piece to get there and back. He kicked the speedboat into full throttle, throwing us back into startled laughter. We gleefully laughed so hard at the freedom of the land blowing by us and hot desert air whipping through our hair and our clothes. I will be back here to pick you up in exactly 1 hour, the taxi driver informed us. Do not miss your ride. And we were off. We hopped onto a narrow dirt path that led us into a whole colony of people who live by the river. The foliage seemed to resemble more jungle and banana trees encompassing our dirt path. There were areas on either side of the dirt path where the river ran through, but was just standing water, and there were huts constructed on stilts where people lived over the water. I saw a man with a backpack step out of his hut and climb down into a kayak. He pulled out oars and began to maneuver his way between the river plants and the wooden stilts of other houses to get to the main river where he could row to land. I wondered if he did this every single day just to go to work. By another house on stilts, we saw a little pen on stable land that had chickens, and there was a boy fishing. We ran into a farmer who was picking bananas off a tree, and he sold me enough bananas to fill my little backpack for $1. We took selfies and pictures of exotic flowers, ate bananas until we were stuffed, then ate more while we sat on the riverbank waiting for our boat to pick us back up. Once we got back to the mainland, she took me to the market. There were dozens upon dozens and dozens of vendors lining the streets, selling fresh produce from their farms, handmade clothing, baskets, blankets, shoes, and lots of street food. She took me to the main plaza so that I could take pictures of the famous church. Finally, it was time to take her home, where her mom invited me in for dinner with the family. I slept so well that night and had great pictures of an unforgettable day to explain why. The next morning, Joanne messaged me that she had arrived at our hotel and arranged for a taxi to come pick me up. I couldn't believe my eyes when we pulled up to the hotel where she was waiting. It was a glamorous 5-star palace. I would learn that this was how Joanne traveled and had very kindly offered to pay for a room with 2 beds so that I could join her. We gave each other a hearty hello hug as she literally just arrived from the States. She brought me a gift, a small lightweight black Columbia brand backpack with a thin waterproof fabric that was a perfect size for hiking or bringing back goods from the store. We met with her colleagues from the University of Neva and began our trip the next day. I wasn't even sure exactly what we would be doing, but I was just excited to be with a group of Colombians on our private tour bus seeing new places. First, we went to the Tatacoa Desert, the second largest desert in Colombia, with La Guajira being the biggest, in the northeast corner of the country along the border of Venezuela. I didn't even know we were going to a desert until we got there, and I was just in awe of the unique arid beauty, the stone monuments, and vibrant flowers blooming out of cacti. There were huge cacti towering over me. We got out to explore. I discovered to my delight that there were 2 sections of desert. The one we first arrived at was brown, and the one we went to next on the other side was all gray. The experience was intoxicating. 3 days ago, I woke up in my apartment, smelling my neighbors cooking breakfast, then sat to drink my coffee and behold the beauty of the Andes Mountains from the kitchen window. Now, I was exploring a desert. I had to do this forever, crossing borders one after another. The next day, we started our longer road trip to the city of San Agustin in southern Huila, where we went to the archaeological park to see historical sculptures. On our way back from San Agustin, we stopped at a lookout point on the side of a steep canyon that gave us a view of the Magdalena River and the whole valley below. Our bus driver made lots of stops in small towns and villages so we could see famous old churches, legendary artwork, and try street food. Before we left this place to start our adventure in Bogota, my new friends from the university gifted me a long-sleeve soccer jersey from Neva's soccer stadium, a jersey specifically representing Huila's soccer team. It was a lasting, tangible souvenir from that remarkable trip with the remarkable people who I will carry in my heart forever. Next came my first experience in Bogota. This presented a new climate surprise, sitting at 2,644 meters above sea level, making it one of the highest altitude cities in all of South America. It was cold and rainy, with the sun making an occasional appearance, and felt like a shock from the dry desert climate I had just left in Huila. I had no idea that Joanne was from an extremely affluent family. Her father was one of the most prestigious architects in Colombian history. His name and work I won't share out of respect for the family's privacy. A private car picked us up from the airport, driven by the family's chauffeur. We drove nearly an hour to the fanciest area of Bogota. The chauffeur unlocked the gate for us to go through, giving us access to a mini complex of 5 elegant houses built up with the state-of-art architecture, adorned with pristine landscaping. Joanne's family owned all of these houses. The complex was all theirs. I had all the next day to myself to go explore. Joanne said that she would have the driver drop me off in an area of Bogota named La Candelaria, which was where Bogota started long ago. I woke up that morning with an insatiable desire to get a tattoo, and I wanted "Love Conquers All" translated into Arabic along the length of my left forearm. I messaged my Palestinian friend Mukarram from OU for the Arabic translation. In the car on the way to La Candelaria, Joanne told me the history about a lot of things along the way. Arriving at my stop, she handed me a list of museums that she suggested I check out while I was out exploring. "Thank you so much," my lips said to her while Borisville rang out in my mind. I would stick that list in my bra in case I needed it for toilet paper later, but I was going to have a wide open day full of exciting adventures, one of which would include a tattoo and none of which included a library or a museum. As soon as I was by myself with wide open roads for me to wander, fireworks started going off in my soul spaces. Boom, boom, boom. There was so much character in the cobblestone streets, the narrow sidewalks, and hand-painted artwork on the buildings. First, I want a piece of chocolate cake and a cup of Colombian coffee, I thought. I noticed a sign ahead for a coffee shop. As soon as I ordered and sat down, the barista started to play Adele's album 19, and the song Daydreamer began to chime in the background. I couldn't believe it. Adele was my favorite artist. I knew every song by heart, and this tiny coffee shop in Bogota was playing her entire first album, and not even a song that was a big hit on mainstream music channels. It was like the universe did that just for me in that exact moment and that exact location. I literally sat there and cried. I was so happy, singing along, spitting chocolate crumbs everywhere. Gosh, maybe one day I would write books about my life and my travels, and they would be just as famous, read in places across the world, just like Adele's music is scattered across the world. Or, even better, maybe somehow Adele would read my books and visit me in whatever foreign place I happened to be visiting. Is there a tattoo shop around here? I asked the barista, who was so smitten about our mutual love for Adele. He had told me that it was by means of her music he had taught himself so much English. I have no idea. Let me check, he said. He gave me some suggestions, but I decided to just walk until I stumbled across one. And I did, an hour later, after many rights and lefts. I saw a sign on a window and walked in to discover that one side of the room was a tattoo shop and the other side of the room was a barber shop. Are you taking clients? I asked the tattoo artist. I showed him the Arabic translation I had. I sent it to his email so that he could use his computer to enlarge it to the size I wanted. We don't have any running water right now, he said. Will that be a problem for you? Hey, not as long as you use new needles. As you use new needles and can still give me a beautiful tattoo just the way I wish, I told him. And we were off. While I got tattooed, I chit-chatted with the two barbers when they had a break between customers. When I finished with my tattoo, everyone asked me if I would like to stay to eat lunch with them. Only if we do shots of tequila, I counter-offered. Nobody had ever shot tequila before. I was honored to give them their first experience. Everyone chipped in on a bottle, and on our way back from the liquor store, we got some salt and limes from a guy selling mangoes. My God, the rest of the day we had so much fun playing board games and doing shots of tequila. They still stopped to attend to customers, tattooing and cutting hair in between shots. Finally, I bid them a heartfelt farewell and connected with all of them on social media before using the last hour of daylight to continue exploring. As I searched out stunning street art to photograph, I found a cozy pub that had plantain soup available as a dinner feature. The chilly Bogota climate made it difficult to say no, especially since that soup was my new favorite. So I sat at the bar top to eat my soup and enjoy frothy, locally brewed tap beer. I struck up a conversation with the guy sitting next to me who shared that his wife was an attorney who works with victims of the political conflict. He personally was working on a documentary about the peace agreement in Colombia's turbulent history with military violence. He asked if I would like to meet his wife. He, his wife, their German Shepherd, and I watched the sunset over the city from the rooftop at their high-rise apartment building. This is a very rare thing to see because of rain and air pollution in Bogota. Again, it was a moment from the universe only for me. When I got back to Joanne's, I could only imagine how shocked they were. They expected a quiet conversation over dinner about museums and newly acquired information about Colombian history, and instead I stumbled into the house reeking of tequila with my left arm wrapped in plastic to protect my new tattoo. I can't take my eyes off you for one moment, she told me. You are quite the basket of surprises. The rest of her family chewed their food in silence, exchanging uncomfortable glances as I animatedly shared my stories about board games, tequila shots with strangers, tattoos, and sharing a sunset on the rooftop with more strangers. They were a tough crowd. I confirmed my suspicions about not having much in common with them and excused myself from the table after I shared all my stories and after I finished eating all of their expensive cheese. It was time to pack. I was heading back to Medellin the next day for a new round of adventures.